Hello, my name is Charles Baker, and this is a hopefully brief presentation on the things that I've learned as a new Meteor developer. My current background, I'm a college student pursuing a degree in Information Systems Management from Shawnee State University in Portsmouth, Ohio. I don't have any professional experience when it comes to Meteor yet, which is something I am looking forward to hopefully accomplishing in the future. My preference when it comes to web programming is definitely towards back-end information and not so much front-end and design. I started learning Meteor between 3 and 6 months ago just as a hobby, and I'm hoping that it will eventually become a professional kind of thing, and I'm definitely working towards that with the current project that I started working on, which is called Intrepid. Meteor is an open source web framework that was written in JavaScript on top of Node.js. It was founded a few years ago, around 2011, I believe. It's able to produce code for multiple platforms, first starting with web only, but they also support exporting projects to mobile platforms through Cordova. It uses MongoDB as a NoSQL document-driven storage system. And it uses DDP, the Distributed Data Protocol, to propagate any changes in database contents to any connected clients in real time. This allows for not only making web applications that'll work in a browser, but any language that has a library that can deal with DDP can connect to your Meteor application from outside the application using things like Visual Basic, C#, things of that nature. The web client for writing like actual client stuff in a web browser depends on jQuery. So those of you who are comfortable writing in jQuery are definitely able to use that in your application from the beginning. It's part of the core packages that are required for any Meteor application. The 7 principles of Meteor that they advertise are data on the wire, one language, database everywhere, latency compensation, full stack reactivity, embracing the ecosystem, and simplicity equals productivity. Data on the wire, basically what they're talking about is the job of Meteor is to send data to the client, and that's kind of where it stops. The client is responsible for handling the data. It's just you just want to get it there. One language, the whole point of the one language principle is that you're able to write server and client stuff in JavaScript, and they want it to be what they call an isomorphic programming experience, just instead of having separate languages for client and server like PHP or Perl or what have you. Database everywhere and latency compensation are kind of related. You're dealing with having what's called mini Mongo. It is a client-side copy of the database that allows for the client to use latency compensation to simulate changes to the database before they actually happen. So you're able to get that reactive feeling of things instantaneously happening as opposed to going through page refreshes and waiting for like a round trip thing to the database before you see a change. Full stack reactivity involves like anytime there's a change in the information that you're looking at on a Meteor page, it's going to, assuming reactivity is enabled, the information is going to update in real time while you're looking at the page, which is pretty awesome. Embracing the ecosystem has to do with there being like a really big ecosystem with custom packages and stuff, and a registry called Atmosphere, and they're through Meteor allows you to write really simple code and doing what you would be doing in other frameworks in like hundreds of lines. You're able to do with Meteor in 10 because of the framework you're working on top. I've learned quite a few things in my first 3 months as a Meteor developer, even though I haven't done anything professionally yet. First, I learned that it was really, really quick to get started with Meteor. All you do is you grab the packet, you either grab the installer from the website if you're on Windows, or you can just grab it with curl if you're on OS X or Linux. Then you just dive right in once it's installed. It's possible you might have to reboot it because of path information, but you just run Meteor space create space and then your project name, and you're good to go. Just jump into the directory in a terminal, run the Meteor command, and connect your app on port 3000 in your browser, and you can start developing right away. Whenever you start a Meteor project, it's going to have the core packages, and it's also going to involve it's going to have insecure and auto publish enabled. I found right away that like in my first few projects, I kind of liked having them just because I wasn't used to how the security models worked, and I just wanted to have something tangible to work with right away. The insecure package basically tells all of your collections, which are essentially similar to SQL tables in MongoDB, that all clients are able to access all data all the time, and they're able to add things to the database, remove things from the database, and update records without any kind of permissions checks or anything like that. And auto publish has to do with the publishing and subscription system, which I'll cover later, that controls access to records that you're sending to the client for them to view, not so much update and edit. Those two packages are really useful if you're just starting with Meteor and you just want to get used to displaying things and how things look. But once you start doing more serious things with it, I find, even with my current project, that I immediately remove them from the project when I started, and that forced me to worry about publishing subscriptions and data access immediately, and it's easier to do it that way, I feel, than going back and figuring out what you need to do later. It's easier just to do it as you go. One of the coolest things I found about Meteor was that it has a feature called hot code pushing. And basically what that does is anytime I'm working on an application and I make a change to the code, either on the server or the client, it's going to send those changes to the client immediately. And they're going to see changes to the code without losing their connection to the server, like losing their login, losing what they're working on. The server will automatically restart if a server file has been changed, and if it's something in the client folder that only the client can see, all it's going to do is send a refresh to the clients, and it'll just have the pages refresh while they're looking at them, so they won't have to do anything themselves. I found out immediately that the community is extremely helpful and welcoming. I tend to hang out a lot in Meteor on irc.freedom.net, which is their official channel, as well as the forums, and I tend to ask a lot of questions on Stack Overflow, and I've learned a lot from that. I also found out very quickly that packages are really good, and they've gotten the quality of the packages that have been out have gotten substantially better in a short amount of time. Some of the ones that I find to be most useful when working in any project are Iron Router, which has to do with routing is taking a path that someone's trying to visit in your app from the server and taking that path and then rendering a template using Blaze, which is the templating system, or I think there are some others that are supported now, like Jade and stuff like that. Uses Blaze and a templating engine called Spacebars. So Iron Router is responsible for handling routes and path information. It's a client or server side. You could also use Iron Router if you want to set up an HTTP REST API for your application, for people just to be able to get at it with an API. You can use Iron Router to do that also. I also use Meteor roles, which lets you set like roles for your users, like access levels, essentially like user groups. Like for Intrepid, I have an admin role, a normal user role, and then a role specifically for users that have been banned from the website, so they're in their own little group that they could be taken out of if need be. I use Simple Schema, which lets you apply like an SQL type schema to your collections, which makes it more similar to SQL for people that care about the integrity of the data and consistency. I use Twitter Bootstrap, the CSS framework, to just be able to rapidly prototype like front-side, client-side stuff and not have to worry about writing tons and tons of CSS. I use CollectionFS for storing files. It's a really good file storage package. You end up needing to use CFS standard packages, and then there's a list of storage adapters like files. Just storing in the server file system is an option, as well as storing to Dropbox and Amazon S3, which is what I'm using for Intrepid. Autoform is really useful for taking a schema from Simple Schema and using that schema to generate forms for making manipulations to your database. That's really super useful if you just want to have some quick forms. Those that are familiar with doing stuff in like Ruby on Rails and the forms helpers, and then it's kind of the same thing, except it's not nearly as in your way and intrusive as that is. It seems to be a lot more straightforward and easy to work with. And I use Kadira is a package and a service online that it monitors the performance of your app in many different ways, and lets you have a graphical way to sort through errors that get thrown. It catalogs errors that get thrown by your application and stores them in there in a really nice web front end. You can just go to kadira.io if you want to check that out. Publications and subscriptions are a thing that I had a really hard time learning about, and I guess it's a really a fundamental part of the database everywhere tenet of Meteor development. Basically, publication and subscription together make a copy of parts of the database from the server to the client, and which reduces the traffic coming from the server to the client, like reduces the bandwidth usage, and it tends to improve security. Basically, what you're doing is you're taking you're saying that you want to take a section of you're taking a section of a collection, and you're only allowing the client to see the part of the collection that you want them to see and not the whole thing. Like in the example I've got right here, I have a publication written that takes a look at the post collection, but it offers a parameter. It offers a parameter called author. So when you go to subscribe to this publication, what it's going to do is it's going to look in the posts collection, and it's only going to pull the records from the post collection that have the author name that you give it. In this example, you can use whatever combination of parameters you want, or none at all. If you just want to have like a universal publication, this is like, here's the entire post thing, you can have it. Iron Router is really good about handling publications and being able to do things based on whether or not publications have finished sending through and stuff like that. You can look at the documentation for Iron Router on GitHub, and you can get some more information about how it handles publications and subscriptions, as well as in the Meteor documentation itself. And there's a really fantastic article about publications and subscriptions on the Discover Meteor website, because they do some really cool stuff over there too, and that the book is amazing. I couldn't recommend it enough. I got a lot faster doing Meteor development, especially client-side stuff, when I learned about data context. Basically, a data context is a reference to what the current object is that you're working with. And whenever you learn to work with data contexts and getting used to dealing with like working with parts of templates in terms of a specific object, you learn that you don't have to write helpers for every single piece of information that you want on your website, which is something that I was doing when I first started. You can just take you take an object, tell spacebar that you want to work with that as a context, and then you can just start tossing properties of that object right into your code without having to write helpers and stuff like that. It's really, really simple, and it makes things faster. Another thing that I had to learn that was really complicated at first, now I'm quite comfortable with, is ways of handling authorization for dealing with database changes. The two main methods that they talk about in the documentation are the use of allow, deny, and the use of server methods. Allow, deny is a lot easier to use, and you just kind of specify at an overall collection level what operations are going to be allowed from the client by taking certain things into account. Basically, you will have an allow and deny block for for all of your collections that will do things based on the document that you're working with and the user that you're working with for inserting, updating, and removing items in general from that collection. If you're using Insecure, you don't need to worry about that because this is going to allow everything for everything. Server methods are more involved to use, and what you're going to do is you're going to define a method and only allow changes to the database through the use of the method, as opposed to allow deny, which is just controlling who can do it, basically. It seems that the use of server methods, I think, are better, and it's something that I'm going to make a transition towards with Intrepid, because currently I'm using allow deny, but I think I might make a change. It just seems to be way more secure and better in general to be making specific decisions on the changes of databases, as opposed to just a sweeping generalization of what things you're going to have to work around with making changes to your database. You're always going to want to define server methods in a place where the client and server can both see them, because you're going to have a client and server copy of the database through the use of your server and Minimongo, which is like the client version of the database. This provides latency. The use of server methods also provides latency compensation. Whenever you call a Meteor method through the use of meteor.call, you're going to do two things. The client is going to request the server run the method in a secure environment, which is what the server considers trusted code. And it's also going to do a simulation of the same operation at a client level, allowing for an instantaneous, an instant reaction of the UI based on what the client thinks is going to happen. Then when the server finishes its round trip, it compares the result with what the simulation is, and then depending on whether or not those outcomes are the same, either the UI is going to stay the way it is, or the UI is going to change depending on what actually happened on the server if the client was wrong with its simulation of what was supposed to happen. I learned that if you tend to care about your data and how it's structured and how consistent it is, you're going to want to pretend that MongoDB is SQL. And through the use of packages like collections to simple schema and the use of migrations by Percolate, you can almost sort of transform this concept of a collection into more of a SQL style table, because you're able to create a schema that has like required properties of incoming documents and requiring types and whether or not they're optional, similar to fields in SQL tables, and whether or not they can be null, and setting specific types on them that have to be matched, providing validation for data coming into your application. I also learned that being able to log into an application is super important, and you should never, if you can avoid it, use third-party packages that are meant for account stuff. There are lots of account packages that are already part of Meteor that deal with social things like Facebook, Twitter, like account providers like that deal with OAuth and all that good stuff for you. So through using those and the basic accounts UI, accounts password, which is just a username password or email password kind of stuff, you can just take those packages and adjust the looks of them through JavaScript and CSS and do what you need to do, as opposed to using third-party packages which might break without you being able to fix them, and then people will suddenly not be able to log into your application and things will get really bad really fast. I also learned that it's super important to have organization and get into a habit of structuring your applications, all the applications you do the same way, because you'll be a lot faster in knowing exactly where files are that you're looking for, and you'll just kind of get into a habit of putting all of your stuff in the same place. You're always going to there are certain folders that Meteor looks for specific things for, and folders that you're always going to have, and then everything else is kind of freeform and everybody gets their own style. On the right hand side here, I have a sort of an example of the structure that I tend to use on all the applications that I start. You'll have your server folder, which only the server is allowed to see, the client folder, which everything in that folder will get published to the client. A public folder, which will also always get published to the client, but is used only to hold static and media assets like images and videos and stuff like that. And private, which is kind of similar to public, except for the fact that it's used by the server and not the client, and you have to use the assets pipeline to be able to load things out of it. Anything outside of those 4 folders will be seen by the client and the server both. For example, the collections folder in my sample project structure is such a folder, and the lib folder are both folders that the client and server will both be able to see, which is why I store my collections in a place that can be seen by everything, as well as global variables, and all of my routing can be seen by client and server. I learned that scoping is really important, and it can be kind of tricky. Scoping is always kind of a tricky thing with new programming. And with Meteor, there's only 2 scopes you need to worry about. If you're using the var keyword when you define a variable, Meteor is going to scope that variable to only be seen inside the file that variable is in. But if you don't use the var keyword, that variable will be seen everywhere in your project, and it'll have global scope instead. That can be useful, like, for instance, defining collections. You're not going to want to use the var keyword because you're going to want to have access to that collection everywhere in your application on client and server. So the location of the variable, like the file that it's in and where that is also important. Because if you have a quote-unquote global scoped variable inside the server folder, just because it's global scope doesn't mean that the client's going to be able to see if it's only meant for the server. I also found out that deployment really isn't that difficult. If you're doing testing and the resources you need to be able to do aren't that substantial, you can deploy your project to Meteor servers simply by running a command meteor deploy, and then whatever the name is for like the subdomain that you want, .meteor.com. In order to deploy to their servers, you have to have a Meteor account on meteor.com, which is completely free, and you'll have to log in the console whenever you go to do it. It'll ask you for your username and password, so it can associate the project with your Meteor account. You can also easily deploy things to servers that are not on Meteor's thing. Like in my case, my current project requires Graphics Magic, which is like a graphics manipulation program that deals with image resizing for things like profile photos, screenshots, whatever whatever kind of images you're looking to store through something like CollectionFS that need to be resized, you're going to need a like a third-party program that you might not have access to on Meteor's servers, which they specifically said they don't have that. So you have to end up deploying to somewhere else, which is also not that difficult. I've heard of people using Heroku and Modulus as a they're called a platform as a service for you to throw your stuff up there. And I haven't had any experience personally with using either of those two services. I've used Heroku for PHP things in the past, but I've not tried to deploy any Meteor stuff. But I have heard of professional people using those services and having success with them. What I ended up doing myself was I installed Node.js and MongoDB on my personal VPS web server in New York City, and I use a program called Meteor, which is a small little node utility that deals with remote deployments through SSH, and it's really easy to use, and their documentation is really good. There's our link right there. It's https://github.com/aranota/meteor-up, and there's plenty of documentation there to get you started. It's really not difficult at all. I also found out that package authoring really isn't that difficult. I ended up having to, throughout the course of my current course of development with my Intrepid project, I had to grab the official Lightbox, the Lightbox 2 JavaScript library for displaying images and like the little Lightbox thing. And I ended up grabbing that library and wrapping it in a Meteor package so I would be able to install it easily wherever I went. And it was as simple as generating a project folder using Meteor create -- package and personally ccbaker : I just called it Lightbox 2, I believe. Edited the package.js file to reflect the stuff that's in it, used the documentation to figure out how to include files and provide them to the application, and then I immediately published it to Atmosphere using Meteor space publish space -- create, and it went right up to Atmosphere. The entire process was pretty painless. I'd never done it before, and I was able to figure it out within an hour. Meteor is pretty amazing. I think that it has a lot of potential to do a lot of amazing things, especially now that they've expanded to mobile platforms through the use of Cordova, and being able to deploy things to generate APKs and installation packages for iOS and Android to make basically native applications for those. There's a lot of active development going on. The community's been really great. Lots of work is being done all the time. It's an open source project, so the community is super involved in making sure that it's as good as it can possibly be, and that it is ready for use in a production environment instead of just being something for use as like a hobby. I think I last saw that there were approximately 5,000 to 5,500 packages that are being hosted on Atmosphere right now. That amount could be off at this time, but the quality of the packages that exist are consistently getting better, and they're going to keep getting better the more mature Meteor itself gets, and the better that people get at writing packages for it. And I personally recommend it to everybody that I meet and tell them that I personally feel that this platform really is the future, and you can do a lot of really, really amazing things with it. The things that I do wish that it had, the things that I wish regarding Meteor was that there was a platform as a service similar to Heroku or something like that that was specifically designed for Meteor, that had stuff like Git-based deployment and access to remote Meteor shells, so you can like inspect what your application is doing using a terminal, and just being able to deploy it using Git instead of using the current deploy thing like Git-based deployment like Heroku that automatically launches your project and keeps it running for you and allows you to scale it horizontally whenever you need to. I also wish I knew more about about the active testing in Meteor, like software testing, unit testing, and all that good stuff, and being able to do test-driven development. Because when I started to learn Ruby, which I never completed doing, I just was moving around a lot, dealing with different software, different languages, and stuff like that at the time. But the book I was using talked about test-driven development, and I found that practice was really, really interesting, and I wish that I knew how to do something like test-driven development in Meteor. I hear that testing using a thing called, I think it's called Velocity, is a thing that's going on right now and is slowly getting better, but the testing itself is kind of a work in progress right now due to the different testing packages like Jasmine and Mocha and stuff being kind of weird with Meteor, and that there's just a lot of work being done. So I guess it's something I'll look into probably with my next project that I'll work on, because I think that software testing is definitely the next step personally towards being a lot more professional in terms of development. In closing, I really think that Meteor is a really great platform, and I definitely tend to do more with it in terms of recording presentations like this one, because I think that Meteor in general and just programming in general is a thing where people should just be sharing information with each other. And I felt like in recording this video, it would be useful to give other people that are as new as I am some insight as to the kinds of things that I ran into and the things I felt were most important that I learned along the way into becoming more familiar with the kind of stuff that I've been doing. And I just think that it's gone really well. So I hope anybody that catches this presentation sticks around for more content, because I hope to release more in the future. Thanks.